I am Mary Lee Berry with the Summit. And now here's
I'm Mary McDonald.
the Summit. All right.
Again, Elaine Traffic Summit.
Denise Wooden, United Way of Westchester and Putnam, and we have coming up our Taste of the Sound Shore event on April 20th at Bonnie Briar Country Club, and I have invitations here, and so I will pass them around.
Thank you.
Leona Newman with Hope Community Services.
Everybody knows Hope Community Services. Amy Lou? Can you introduce? I forgot who you are. Would you like me to help remind you who you are?
Ernie Ricketts of Rhinebeck School District.
Kay Francis Richards, the Summit.
Jane Orange, Community Counseling Center. Marie Michelle Summit, Bay Lane.
Jim McDonald, American Cap Center and Hope Community Services. Larchmont Avenue Church is going to be doing a fundraising dinner for eye care and Hope Community Service on April 17th. Everyone is welcome. If you can't attend, donations are gladly accepted.
Rudy Lager with the Larchmont Avenue Church, Larchmont resident.
Welcome.
Good morning, Keith Geiser, Rhinebeck Public Schools, Summit, and Cap Center.
And we'll go over to there. Yes.
I'm Cindy Habig from Pizza Council in the Larchmont Mamaroneck School.
Lynette C., Mamaroneck School Board. Robin Achinsky, Mamaroneck School Board.
Rena Peter, Larchmont Mamaroneck PT Council. Janet Buckbinder, the Summit, Mamaroneck School Board, and Radar.
Mariana Bonilla, Summit, Gentleman Theater.
Paige Rentz, Sound and Town.
Paul Abramson, old-timer and former school board president.
Paul Abramson. Two former school board presidents.
Heidi Sickles, Rhinebeck School Board and Summit Board.
Good morning, Debbie Minetta, Director of Public Information, Mamaroneck Schools.
Wonderful. Welcome, one and all. Shall we have the specific introduction of our speakers? How about, Jan, do you want to handle that, or Heidi? Just Heidi. Very good.
Not well positioned for the camera over there. Today we're very pleased to have representatives or leadership from our two school districts in this community. We've got Mamaroneck Schools here, Representative Dr. Paul Freed and Ms. Meryl Rubenstein. As you know, Dr. Freed is the superintendent of schools and Ms. Rubenstein is their assistant superintendent for business. And then Rhinebeck Schools over here, we have Dr. Peter Mustick and Dr. Kimberly Bucci. Dr. Mustick is the superintendent of schools, and Dr. Bucci is our assistant superintendent for business and finance at Rhinebeck. So they're going to be talking about the difficulties, in particular this year, of developing a school budget which is responsive to the community's needs in terms of keeping the taxes as low as absolutely possible, but still keeping the quality education that this community is known for in both districts. So it's quite a very delicate balancing act, and they're going to talk about that. As you know, if you want more details, that's the reason why I gave the sheet out. Both schools' websites very shortly here, in the next day or two, are going to have full budget presentations, budget information. This is actually a tiny bit early today. Our official budget is presented to our school communities. I believe Mamaroneck is this evening, right? Do you have your first budget hearing?
7:30.
7:30 this evening at Mamaroneck High School. Where is that location?
In the tiered classroom.
In the tiered classroom, Mamaroneck High School. In Rhinebeck, our first budget hearing is tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. in the middle school, high school community library. And that's where you can really get a lot more details. Today, of course, it's more of a discussion of the issues and not a full budget presentation. If you want that, either go on the website, you'll be able to catch it both on LMC-TV after they're presented, but you can get that information tonight at Mamaroneck and tomorrow at Rhinebeck. As typical, I think most of you are familiar with faces, so you know that we'll have about a half an hour of presentations. I believe Mamaroneck Schools will go first, and then Rhinebeck Schools, and then after that, we'll have a good 25 to 30 minutes of Q&A. Thank you for coming. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone.
Mamaroneck is leading off this morning, and thank you for inviting us. We're pleased to be here. The timing of the event is a bit tricky for us, as our first evening where we actually present the superintendent's recommended budget is this evening at 7:30. So last night I made sure that our
Keep it a secret.
keep it a secret. No. So last night I made sure that our Board of Education was well aware of the most recent update in terms of what we'll be presenting this evening. So there'll be much more going on this evening as we go through many more details. Going around the room right now is a handout which encompasses some of the slides that I'll be using this evening in the presentation. And so let me just explain a bit about the process, if you're not familiar. At this time, we present what's called a superintendent's recommended budget to our boards of education. They have the opportunity over the next month or so to make adjustments in that, of course, listening to community input, parent input, asking questions of the administration, and ultimately, approximately 1 month from today, they will come out with what's called the Board of Education budget. They will adopt that budget, and that will be the budget that is presented to the taxpayers. So while this is called the superintendent's recommended budget, there is still room for things to change over the next month. Just beginning with our slides, back on November 30th, we began this budget process because we were very concerned about the economy, about the economic factors affecting our community, and so we began to talk about the issues that were before us. We had approximately 150 people attending a meeting at the Hummocks Library to hear about what we consider the crisis that was before us. We gathered a great deal of input that evening, and one of the things that we gathered was that first slide called Our Community's Values. And individuals talked about the things that they valued most. And those 5 bullets that you see there: quality of education, quality of teachers and staff, the diversity in our district, the breadth and strength of our programs, and specifically our programs in the arts and athletics, were named specifically, and support for students with special needs. The other thing that we gathered that evening were many, many questions, and in the course of that meeting and thereafter, about 200 questions, which now have been answered. It took us almost a full month, and our Board of Education and Administration worked very hard during that month. And if you go to our website, under the topic Budget Communications, you will see the answers to those 200 questions, which is really an encyclopedia of budget information that really can be used in almost any school district. Moving ahead to the next slide, our district and our community. And we really see this as a united effort, and that's the reason we reached out so early to our community. We recognize the financial hardships, we listened very carefully. Complete transparency, very important to our community, our taxpayers, and to us. Everything is disclosed. Being responsive, and we're all in this together because we really believe that the health of the community is connected to the health of the schools. Much of what people value has to do with our school district here in Mamaroneck and Larchmont, and of course, home values are important, and keeping the excellence in our schools is important. So our theme this year is the framework for excellence. And this year we've had 4 district goals, and I won't go into any of those details, but these are the large headings. Of course, we lead off with student learning. That has to do with quality of instruction, has to do with assessments, and it has to do with our work in and out of the classrooms that make our schools so well off. Communication and community involvement has been a large theme. The Board of Education has a communications committee. Our website is fairly new and very responsive. Debbie Mineta, you just met a few minutes ago, our Director of Public Information, is really communicating on behalf of the board and district in a way that we've never done it before, and we're very proud of our efforts in that area. Looking at our business practices, and Meryl is here, our Assistant Superintendent for Business Operations, looking at the components of that, and our personnel services to make sure that we're as responsive to our employees as we can be. As probably the largest employer in Mamaroneck, Larchmont, again, we're very responsive to the needs of the people that work within our district. Turning the page, our next slide, our path, depicts the things that we've done so far. So I mentioned before, we began on November 30th with our community meeting. In February and March, we held three what I called at the time budget meetings. These were meetings that we actually called budget reduction initiatives. And during those meetings, I worked very closely with our central staff members, our building principals who work with their faculties, and we presented options to be considered as we knew we were not able to bring this year's budget to next year. The cost to the taxpayers would have been extraordinary and would have presented even greater financial hardships than people are now facing. We knew we had to really hold back the budget-to-budget increase, the total amount of money that the school district could spend. So we held again a bunch of meetings we called budget reduction initiatives, and we presented options. We had options for our elementary schools, for our middle school, for our high schools. I asked each building principal to come back and present to our central office team in a series of budget meetings initiatives that would decrease their spending by $500,000, by $1 million, and by $1.5 million for our elementary division, our 4 schools, our middle school, and our high school. And I presented a series of options to the Board of Education and Community. We asked our Director of Music to do the same, our Director of Athletics to do the same, and we looked at every area in the school district with budget reducing initiatives. And this again was to keep the dollar amount from moving ahead at the same pace that it has moved ahead in the past. And now, of course, at the point of creating what we call the superintendent's recommended budget. So as you can see on the next slide, the budget we presently have is $120,695,077. The recommended budget brings it to $122,464,394 for a budget increase of $1,769,317. That's a 1.4% budget-to-budget increase. We think it may possibly be the lowest budget increase in the history of the district, a 1.47% budget-to-budget increase. And the majority of that are salaries and benefits. Even though you'll see in a moment that we've reduced the staff in the district by approximately, I think it's about 55 or 56 positions, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. Salaries and benefits, of course, do continue to go up, and even though we're reducing staff by so many people, that is still the largest factor that's bringing the budget-to-budget increase up. Many of the other areas in the budget have seen decreases, and on Saturday, March 20th, we'll be having a line-by-line discussion with the community, and all those pieces will be out as well. For the next 2 slides, I'm going to ask Meryl to say a few words about them.
As Dr. Frieda mentioned, we were making changes to the budget as late as last evening, so these 2 slides right now are just representative. They are not accurate for the numbers that we have right now tonight. If you come to the meeting or look at our website, you will see accurate slides like this. But this is just to show you what makes up our budget. And you can see the largest piece of the budget is salary and benefits. As a school district, we basically have mostly employees that we deal with. Equipment is a very small piece of our budget. Contractual services, which are bringing in people to do some types of things that we can't do on our own. Occupational therapist. It also includes tuition for some special education students that go out of district. We also have part of our transportation contracted out, so that's all included in that contract. It's a big sort of umbrella term for a lot of things. Materials and supplies, again, a very small part of our budget, about 2%. And then some fiscal fees and transfers, which when we go into our budget meeting, we'll give some more explanation about. But that covers certain things like debt service and things along those lines. If you look at the revenue side, and again, those are not the exact numbers for this year's budget that we're going to be presenting. This is the property tax here is the largest percent. About 90% of the budget comes from the taxpayers. Very small amounts come from other types of resources. And as you know, one of our other revenue areas are interest, and as you know, interest levels have been very low, so those numbers had dropped over time. You know, we've seen them level out. But the majority of the revenues that support the budget come in this community from the taxpayers.
Next two as well.
Sure. Then we just give you two more slides. The state aid, which is one of those other revenues that we discussed, as you could take a look at that slide, has been declining over the past few years. So every time that declines, we have really no choice but to look towards the taxpayers for making up that difference. We cut the budget back as much as we can, as Dr. Fried said, to help alleviate that burden. Another issue that translates into what you pay, the tax rate, is the assessed valuation. With the tax tertiaries that go on in this community, the assessed valuations have been dropping significantly over the past few years, and we are anticipating another large drop in assessed valuation. What does that mean? That is what translates into how much you pay individually in your taxes. We ask for a certain amount of taxes. We ask the town that we need X number of dollars for the budget, and then the town will go through with the assessments and decide how much each household pays. So as those assessed values are dropping, each household has to pay a larger share to make that up. So, and again, we will go into more detail on how that works this evening.
Now we get to the slides which show some of the reductions. There are certainly more than this. Some examples would be we're cutting all of the money for class trips out of the budget. We've reduced some of our arts offerings. The Homix musical, for example, we've cut that funding by half. The high school musical, which is done in the spring, we've cut that by half. Shakespeare is a very beloved program in our school district. We've cut that by $2,000, but are still supporting it. So we've cut back in many, many ways that don't appear here, but this evening, again, there'll be more explanation. In the area of athletics, we have curriculum coordinators in the area of physical education for 3 schools. We're eliminating those positions. We're taking 8 teams that encompass 9 coaches, 4 modified and 3 freshmen and 1 JV. These are in the sports that would now have a 4th team. An example would be that in basketball, for example, we might have a modified team, a freshman team, a junior varsity team, and a varsity team. Many other sports only have 3 teams, a modified, a JV, and a varsity. In those areas where there are 4 sports, we're cutting those to 3. And that is what you see in the reduction here. That would certainly mean that some students would be affected. We're anticipating that when we go down to the 3 teams per sport, instead of 4 teams in some sports, it will affect 175 children. We're also reducing 14 program assistant coaches. These are individuals that work with our varsity and JV teams to allow us to bring more children onto those teams because of greater supervision, more teaching opportunities. We won't be able to do that. So, for example, instead of having a particular team that might have had 23 children on it, maybe now it's only going to have 18 because there's only 1 coach instead of the coach and this program assistant. We think that'll affect another 70 students. And then the next slide shows the impact in terms of the total staffing impact. Teachers on the elementary reducing by 3.5 positions, middle school 5.4 positions, high school 4.9. Total teacher reductions, almost 14. 11 clerical positions throughout the school district, including administrative support at central staff, 2 custodians, 9 teaching assistants, 17.5 teacher aides, 1 technician, and 2 people in our maintenance department, for total staff reductions of about 56 employees. We have a couple of additions coming into the district as well in the area of special education. So I would say the total reductions are around 53 positions. And by the way, last year we reduced 34 positions. So this is the second and even more difficult budget year that we're facing in a row. We don't anticipate next year being any better. It actually could be worse. So turning the page, let's look at the budget again. Those 2 budget figures I talked about earlier are there. An increase of about 1.7 million, which is a 1.47% increase over the current budget. And the next slide talks about what the tax implications are for that budget-to-budget increase, and it shows the 3 areas. The budget-to-budget increase, 1.47%. The tax levy increase, 1.42%, and that tax levy increase translates into a tax rate increase of 2.81%. So that's what we see, the tax rate increase as well. Merrill has done a fantastic job looking at every revenue source and maximizing the revenues as much as possible in order to bring down that tax rate increase and getting it as close as possible to the budget-to-budget increase. Just a couple more slides. A contingency budget. If the taxpayers in the community vote no to the budget for the first time, the Board of Education has the right to either make it go into a contingency budget immediately or bring it back for a second vote. If the second vote is also a no vote, there's no choice. It must become a contingency budget. Since the cost of living index this year is about 0%, the formula that in fact computes the contingency budget will bring the contingency budget, actually the way the legislation is now written, to below 0%. We believe there's legislation out there that will stop it at 0 because that was the original intent of the law that the legislators all agree on. But right now it's actually, I think, about a -4% or something. But a contingency budget, in our case, would mean that we would have to bring the budget even lower, taking out about another $1.7 million. And as you can see, potentially, it would mean reducing staff. If we looked at teachers in this particular way, about 16 more teachers. My perspective, it would be devastating for the educational program in this community to have to go that far. As you can see, after already reducing 13 teachers and 53 staff members, to have to reduce another 16 again would be devastating to our community. Next steps, of course, the budget meeting this evening. We hope you'll attend the tiered classroom at Mamaroneck High School, 7:30. Then on Saturday, March 20th at 9 a.m., also in the tiered classroom, we go over the budget in great detail, line-by-line analysis. We have a study session on April 6th. The budget is adopted on April 20th. So again, between now and April 20th, the board can make changes. They listen very carefully to our community members. Much of what is in the budget is a result of us listening carefully and making decisions based on what we hear the community saying, and in the best interest, of course, always for the children. And then on May 18th, throughout the state of New York, is the school budget vote. The entire budget book is available starting this evening at that meeting. So you will have the same line-by-line description that the Board of Education has, and that will be available tonight. And then I think we make copies available in our school offices as well. So I will turn it over to my colleagues to my right for Brian Neck's presentation, and then I'm sure there'll be time for questions for all of us.
Thank you. Thanks. Good morning, and thank you all for coming. I'm Peter Mustick. I'm from Mamaroneck Schools. We're pretty much on the same page, except about 1/3 less expensive. because of the size. We are under assault in public education today. There's a dramatic change in the way people are looking at public schools. You hear from the governor, you hear from local residents, you're hearing from our own staffs about not only what's happening in our schools, but also what's happening in terms of how they're funding public education. Repeatedly, we're hearing state cuts to public education. You know, you watch the TV commercials, you hear state cuts to hospitals, you hear state cuts to funding agencies. It's happening all over. How do we manage to maintain quality educational programs? The reason why we all moved to Westchester County. How do we maintain those programs, ensure quality property values because of our schools, and ensure that people are going to have, our present students are going to have the kind of benefit that we all enjoy as Westchester residents for the future? That's the challenge that we're facing as school administrators. That's the challenge that boards of education are facing. And I can tell you, it's very grim. Not unlike Paul, we started this process back in September with our Board of Education creating goals and objectives for the school year. Annually, we do that. Through that process, we begin to think about what's important and what we value as a school board and as a school community. Through October, we meet with our staffs. We talk about staff enrollments. We talk about staff projections. November, we have staff budget meetings to decide how we're going to review it. By January, we're reviewing budgets and staffing. This year, we moved that whole process up in an effort to gather some idea about how we were going to make some changes. We realized that last year was dramatic in terms of the kinds of funding mechanisms that happen for schools, and we knew that this year was going to be similar. By February and March, we have proposals to the board, and tomorrow morning will be our first public session. So tomorrow morning will be our first public session. In February, last year in December, I closed the budget for last year, hoping that we could make it through the end of the school year without any further expenditures. And every single item that passed through our desks were carefully reviewed. All conferences were stopped, all what we called unnecessary expenditures were stopped. That was in December. This year, we waited till January, anticipating that we were going to have to hold the line as long as possible. But we had a good budget plan in place. So we felt if we had a good budget plan in place, we should at least try to write it out for the rest of the school year. It didn't work. We decided we needed to stop spending money as much as we could, because we know that labor costs are built in, health benefit costs are built in, pension benefit costs are built into the programs, and we knew that we were seeing reductions. You see what happened with the state. MTA tax. We're now paying MTA tax. There are unfunded mandates. We have students that can move into our district for special needs, and we all believe very strongly that they should be educated. But I have a student, for example, one student who moved into my district last year that is costing my district $300,000 between education, transportation, and medical care that the school is responsible to pay. That happened after the close of last year's budget. Right now, I have two students who moved into my district last week that have increased my present budget $120,000. I have to pay for their special needs. I don't think it's inappropriate. I think they need to be serviced. I just don't think that should be borne by the local taxpayer. I think that needs to become a state issue. So there are shifts. There are major shifts of what's happening in the state that are being pushed back to local schools. And we're expected to manage that and then go out to the public and ask for a public vote of confidence. You know, you heard Paul say, and you'll hear me say, we've kept our budget increases very low. Our budget increase this year, budget to budget, is 1.08%. If you look at any business, our total budget's in $35 million. If you look at any business that runs the way our businesses are running, I employ over 200 employees, $35 million budget. We're running, 5 facilities, an 85,000 square foot facility at the high school, 1,500 students. We're running all those programs at $35 million. And year after year, we're coming up with 1.5, 1.8% budget to budget increases. I challenge any business to be run as efficiently as schools are presently being run. We're also cutting staff. We cut close to 10 staff members last year. We're cutting close to 3 staff members this year. We're holding the line on all purchases from supplies, equipment, but there are built-in expenditures that we must pay. Schools are labor-intensive organizations. They should be. By nature, that's what they're designed to do. It's a teacher in a classroom. And we're holding that sacrosanct. We're making sure that our class size is reasonable, that our students are being effectively educated, and that we're moving in a positive direction. We want to ensure that the quality programs that we all enjoy as students in these public schools maintains itself for the next generation. That's why my parents moved here. I'm sure that's why many of you in the room moved here. That's why it's important to maintain it, not only for all of us to keep our student responsibility, but also to maintain the property values. We're in a very competitive climate. People have a choice. I know for a fact in my school, and I'm sure in Paul's, people shop schools. We have people coming by and looking at various schools as they come by. They carry the New York Times in their hand. And they look at our test scores, and they look at what's happening in our programs, and they look at our facilities, and they want to ensure that when they're buying a home in a quality school district. That's part of the challenge that we're facing. We've had a multi-year approach last year. We're probably going to have a multi-year approach this year and for next year. The economy, we know, is challenging. We understand that. We're all very aware of that, and we're working hard to ensure that it's right. Our debt service in Rhinebeck, we've been very cautious about how we indebt the community over the next few years. So our debt service is it's just about $12 million for the entire district. We've phased that in over a number of years, and if you look at our facilities, they're better than they've ever been in the last 15 or 20 years. We have had favorable contract agreements. That's a major component in how you can determine the budget. Our Board of Education held out for 1 full year with no budget, with no contracts for our teaching staff. That's a major component in how we direct our budget spending. So that's salaries. That has worked to our advantage. Our teachers took fair and reasonable raises over the last few years. That will result in our being able to bring us a better budget-to-budget increase over the next few years. As I said, we decreased staff by 12. You'll see in your packet we have a multi-year approach. We've been looking at this, but the multi-year approach doesn't include some of the changes that you've seen in the pension costs, some of the changes that you've seen in the governor's proposal to cut school aid, some of the changes that you've seen in the assessables. For my community, although state aid is important, it's not a major component of what we do. In fact, I had said to the commissioner and to our legislators, keep your state aid. Get rid of all the state mandates. I'd be the first one. That is the perfect deal for me. Keep your state aid, get rid of the mandates. My students in Rhinebeck don't need to be tested continually year after year to score on the top tier of statewide testing. I don't need to have that every single year. I'm not an inner city school. My students are consistently successful year after year on those statewide testings. That's the bottom of what I would expect from them. We have a higher standard. Why is it important for me to continue to test them? Why is it important for me to pull teachers out of my classroom, send them out for instructional time, have lost days of instruction for my student population, spend time creating a whole data management system so I can manage the data for the state and make sure that all of that gets up? Why is that all necessary? Do it less frequently for schools like ours. Acknowledge the fact that we are better and we're doing a good job. That's an important component. We've talked to the commissioner about that, spoken to the deputy commissioner about that. Make some changes, differentiate among school districts. In southern Westchester County, you have some of the best schools in the state. Acknowledge those schools. Make sure that those schools not only are well funded, but that they're being recognized for what they're doing and then can be replicated around the state. So that's part of what we're looking at. And I'm hoping that with the new commissioner, there is a new wind. We keep hearing this over and over again, that there's a new breeze blowing in Albany. Well, I hope that new breeze blows in Albany, and I hope they have a different impact and a different look at public education. Because without that, frankly, we will turn into New York City public schools. Because slowly, funding will be constantly removed, and those people that can walk will walk away and choose private schools for their students. So they will cherry pick the best students out of our schools. There will be a dramatic change in the local public schools. And I tell this story often. My son, one of my sons, Silly, moved away from his dad, and he lives out in California. And although I'm angry at him for doing that, he lives in a wonderful place called Manhattan Beach, right on the water. And when I went to visit him, we went to visit the local public school because I'm curious about what happens. And he said to me, "Yeah, go up the road, park in the parking. You can park in the parking lot because you can't park on the streets of Manhattan Beach." So I parked in the parking lot of the local public school, and I went in, and I was appalled. It was a disaster. And I walked around, and the principal was there, and I found the principal, and I said, "What happened to this?" He said, "Proposition 13. He said, "Many years ago, the state of California decided that public schools weren't important." He said, "And no longer is the funding there. So you will see people living in these beautiful homes, multi-million-dollar homes all around, a public school that is a disgrace, that we would look at and wouldn't even consider putting our children in." And he said, "But if you go down the road to the private schools," he said, "you'll see similar what's happening in Westchester County." I walked away very depressed from that. But as I began to do the budget last year, and as we went through the process this year, and as I'm hearing what's happening in the state, more and more I'm getting frightened that that's what's happening in public education today. And it's important for all of us to start raising our voices and saying enough. We have to be responsible. If as superintendents, school administrators, boards of education, we're working hard to bring reasonable tax increases, then communities have to also raise their voices to the state and say what's important for us to do in schools. You're going to see we have a very low budget-to-budget increase. We have very low budget-to-budget costs. We've been doing that over the last number of years. We've been working at all of the revenues. This year we put in two very unpopular decisions, where we think we're going to be unpopular, we know it, of helping people understand the importance of being successful in this endeavor. It is a shared initiative, and it's a burden. I absolutely understand it. I was just saying last night, my parents live in the north end of New Rochelle, and of course it was devastated with the hurricane, and they're living there without heat and light. And I'm furious with them. So last night I was on the phone with Paul, and I said, I can't get them out of the house. So I went there, and last night I said, this is ridiculous. My mother's sitting there with a hat on, my father has a coat on, and they're shivering. I said, what are you sitting here for? I have heat and light in my house. You can come to my house. Finally I got them out, and I said to them, what were you saying? Well, we hate to leave the house. We don't really, and I'm saying to myself as I'm driving them away, they don't belong in this house anymore. It's colonial with big staircases. They're walking up and down at night in the dark. I said, do you know what would happen, God forbid, if you fell down the stairs at night? We would be responsible for watching you all the time. You need to come to my house where you are. But I realized that on my parents' street, where they were all kids, there are no longer any children. It wasn't just my parents who were there alone. Their next door neighbors, their other neighbors were all alone. My mother said, there's 5 or 6, we have to talk about this one. So I'm not taking the whole neighborhood home, Mom. I'm just taking you home. We'll see what happens to the rest of those people. But I realized that that's probably very indicative of what's happening in southern Westchester County. There is a shift in the population, and I understand the importance, but it's important for us as residents to make sure that the quality is there for the students, for our grandchildren, their children, and for our own property values. You're going to see great numbers throughout this budget. The other thing we worked on and we discovered, we have no in-district transportation for our own students. Mamaroneck is a walking district. We're Vermont, 20 miles out of New York City. Everybody walks to school. However, we transport for private and parochial school. Under the law, we're obliged to do that. We transported a little over 100 students. That transportation cost, non-special ed, cost $606,000 to the taxpayers of Mamaroneck schools. So this year, we've made a conscious effort. We're going to put everybody on public transportation, or as many people as we possibly can do. Dr. Bucci worked tirelessly in getting all the routes organized and putting everything together. That savings alone will be about $130,000. And I've worked with Judy Myers to see if we could work with the county Beeline buses. They were very good, Judy. I have to tell you, they came. We had a long conversation about changing some areas and what they can do. And I know that the bus company is also under tremendous strain right now. But we talked about what we might do as alternate routes and how that might change. Because we never realized there's no public transportation from the Boston Post Road, from basically right through Rhinebeck schools. There's never been any public transportation up the Boston Post Road. You have to get out to Volstead Avenue and come down public transportation. So we've learned a lot. There's a really neat trick if you don't know it. It's called Trip Finder. You can go on Beeline Bus, type in your address, type in your location. It'll tell you how to get there by public transportation, which is really interesting. But we're now putting students on another transport. That will save our districts $130,000. We've been very careful to look at every single thing in terms of our own programs and other programs that we have to offer. Thank you very much for the time.
We're going to now open it up for questions, and I want to remind everybody that the vote is Tuesday, the budget vote is Tuesday, May 18th.
And today is the Larchmont Village election. And even though it's uncontested, they would love you to vote. Really, really, really. Don't ask me why, but they would. Very nice.
Vote for Living Village?
Judy?
Yes, I have a question actually for both. If you know it, or for all of you, Paul, you said that our state aid for the Mamaroneck School District is 5% of the revenue. Do you know how that compares to other districts in the state?
Well, we're generally low, particularly if we look upstate in districts that are considered less wealthy. Mamaroneck is considered a wealthy district by all standards throughout the state. I'm sure Rhinebeck is in the same situation. So it is based on the perceived wealth that determines state aid. Merrill, what might an upstate school district receive in state aid? 50% of their budget?
80 or 90. 90%.
So large, and particularly when it comes to things like building aid and other areas, districts upstate oftentimes have beautiful resources because the state funds a great deal of them.
What about Long Island?
Would also be considered wealthy, I think, in most cases.
We're 4% in Rhinebeck, 4% state aid, and we send up an extraordinary amount of money to the state. But the way the state formula is based, it's based on property values. So it's based on the fact that if you look at it, every house being $1 million or more in this small area, if you go upstate New York, there's these rural tracts with nothing. So Paul's right, you walk around, the facilities are magnificent because it's 90% funded, 95% funded. And here, it's 19% funded if it's capital projects or less, and for our state aid, it's 4%.
I just have some information. In terms of ranking in the state, all districts, out of about 700 districts, Mamaroneck is 643rd down the list in terms of state aid per pupil, and Rhinebeck is 678.
Oh my God. And what are the Long Island?
Oh, there we go.
What is that on something?
Like Garden City, Garden City.
Yeah, I mean, I have to
Take the time to
Two comments. One, the comment about the importance of the community being solidly behind the schools. This community is somewhat unique in that the very rich and the very poor all send to the same schools. And the moment that you cream off, the comment Superintendent Rice said, the moment you cream off the top 20% and lose that, you have lost something magic. We're in the town of Greenburgh. The school vote in the town of Greenburgh, and very guilty. I mean, I'm somewhat involved in public service, and my wife is in the schools. The school vote is a non-event because the school is completely marginalized by it's just somewhere there. Who knows where it is? So that's terribly important. The second is simply a comment on presentation for Mamaroneck. The table showing reduction in school aid is a 33% reduction. Your table showing reduction in assessment value is a 1% reduction. But if you look at the two side by side, you'd think that you've got a steep reduction in assessment and a steep reduction in school aid. In fact, your assessments are almost level. 1% is almost infinitesimal. The school aid reduction is huge. And I think in the discussions, this reduction in assessment, is a red herring because what's driving this is the reduction in school aid. So just look at that chart.
Actually, it's not. Actually, the difference between the budget and the tax rate increase is all due to the reduction in assessed valuation.
Even that 1% reduction?
1.6%, and yes, it makes that much of a difference. It's scary.
I think that needs some articulation because.
Yeah, I understand the scale of the draft.
I think that's worthy in terms of maintaining community solidarity. Back to point one, explaining how a 1% reduction can translate into that kind of impact is worth spending some time on.
The other areas of revenue reduction have to do with county sales tax. School districts receive a portion of that when the counties, when the spending rate goes down, so to speak, that can be a variable as well. It affected us more last year than this year, but that can be a variable as well.
If you look at the chart that's in our packet, over the last 2 years, and I'm sure it must be much more dramatic for Mamaroneck, we went down almost $60 million in assessables in Rye Town. We have the pleasure of serving two masters, Rye City and Rye Town, so the assessables and tax rates are different in both schools. So we have to explain that constantly. But if you look at Rye Town, $60 million went in assessables we lost over the last 2 years, and this year we're losing about $300,000 or $270,000 in Rye City. So we're losing that. I imagine, Paul, you're losing that 1.6 is quite an impressive number when you start thinking about the actual dollars lost. Wow, no questions. Easy order.
Yes.
Your athletic cuts, when you say you modified and stuff, if a kid is in, say, 9th grade, a freshman team, is he not going to, and say you cut that team, is he not going to be able to play, or could he play on the JV team the next step up?
Sure, 9th graders can always play JV.
Okay, so they could move up, so it might not really affect that many kids.
Right, we're hoping that that would not, for some kids it won't be a factor. Some kids, instead of going from modified to a freshman team, will be able to go from modified to a JV team. And in many of our sports, that's all that's offered is a modified, a JV, and a varsity level. But for some kids who perhaps aren't able to compete at the JV level, they would not have a team to play on.
Program is going to be impacted, there's no question. I know from my district, programs going to be impacted. Students are going to have less opportunities. We've been talking about what are the options. This year we had a committee that started with parents that I've started over the last 2 years called Programs and Priorities. And we talked about what we value. Of course, what we value is academic excellence. I mean, our mission is education. However, we understand that there's a comprehensive program involved in that. It's foreign language in our elementary school to sports in our high school. In our middle school, how do we ensure that all of those stay in place? I can tell you last year we tinkered around the edges and we're able to get through. This year we've tinkered around the edges. But if we go to a contingent budget, we will be cutting teams, we will be changing programs. It will impact the quality of the program that's being offered to the present student population.
Where are you going to be 3 years from now and 4 years from now? You talked about your solution, which we've been talking about for years, is wonderful. That is the state to take away the mandate. But as George Latimer, I'm sure, has told you, the legislature is run by Mr. Silver and New York City, and they look at our schools as being wealthy. So where are you going? Where, and particularly, I mean, where is Mamaroneck and Rhinebeck going 3 years from now?
It's a frightening scenario. One of the things that the Board of Education is considering is looking to the community for support with regard to the potential of looking at the individuals within the community who have expertise in the area of finance to help work closely with Merrill as we think about the future. So that's one thing that we're interested in doing, is partnering with people who perhaps have other ideas for us. The school district is so limited, though, as you know, I'm sure you've had a lot of experience in the school board with regard to what we're able to do and not able to do under New York State education law, that we don't have all of the same tools that a business might have to both increase revenues, decrease expenditures. We're in a particular situation right now in Mamaroneck that I don't believe Rhinebeck is in because of when our contracts were negotiated. The contract that we presently have in place with our teachers and 4 other bargaining units and we have one more year left on those contracts, that was bargained in, quote, better financial times. So we still have 1 year of fairly large salary increases coming forward. Districts that negotiated more recently have been able to hold the line. When we negotiated, we also went 1 year without a contract because we held firm on many things, and we did achieve some things in the contract, including more time and more duties being able to be done by our teachers and so on and so forth. But after next year, because next year will be a negotiating year, we hope to be able to use the lower salary increases that certainly will be negotiated as a way to help curtail the increased budget. But it's a very frightening picture. I don't think any of us have true answers. If this scenario continues to play itself out with decreasing state aid, decreased valuation of our property, and again, labor costs. I mean, some of the things we started to explore, and sometimes contractual issues kind of get in the way, we started to explore things like more lecture center kind of opportunities for kids, more like a college model for some of our kids, because again, it's decreasing the ratio of students and teachers. I think we have to start looking at technology. There's some virtual courses and so on where kids are doing more online things. Again, decreasing the ratio of less teachers and still educating children. I think there are things we're going to have to look at going forward in the future.
I think part of what we're wrestling with is this. When I meet, part of the luxury of being in the size school district that I'm in, I get the opportunity to meet with every graduating senior before they leave. They've been the clients for 13 years, so it's an opportunity for me to chat with them and get their experiences and tell me what they value about our schools. For Mamaroneck, it's the relationship they develop with their staff members that is really a lifelong relationship that really maintains itself. We run a pilot program with Stanford University where we have online coursework where students can take advanced coursework with Stanford University. A very bright young man comes in for his exit interview and says to me, "You know, Dr. Mustick, this is a really great experience, except that it is really, really hard. I'm really struggling because even though this is a college professor, he doesn't, I don't have a relationship, so it's hard for me to keep focused and stay on task." He's doing very well in the coursework. He said, "I have to tell you, I hate it. I don't want to learn like this. I really appreciate the fact that I can walk into a science class or a math class, spend time with my teacher and be there." I am frightened for the future. I think a couple of things we have to do. We constantly have to look at labor settlements. I mean, Mamaroneck is lean and mean already. We don't have a long administrative team. We have 8 administrators district-wide, that's it. That's everybody. We have 1 assistant superintendent. I'm the superintendent. I do the public relations. I have a high school principal that's also the assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction. So we've done all that piece. There isn't a sharing of a business office. I wouldn't share my business office with somebody else. It's too important an initiative to share. We're running a $35 million company. You don't start sharing that kind of services. You do share municipal services, like with the county. If I need help, I want to put students on B-Line buses, I could save $600,000. I could save another $50,000 or $70,000 simply by moving a route onto the Boston Post Road. I would love that to happen. That's a great intermunicipal sharing with the county. But just an advertisement for my
A few more questions in. I know everybody wants to leave at 9. I know you've been waiting.
I think you guys have done a great job, all of you in your presentations. This has really been illuminating. I think the chart that really grabs me the most is the one that shows the 15-year budget history for your school in Mamaroneck. And here we are, 15 years of at times increases, and suddenly we're down to 1%. And just to build on the previous question, if you project out the next 5 years, you're certainly going to be going into negative territory. I mean, we know what the national economy is like. There's no question about what's happening in Albany and the state. And with all these dynamics, I think you've done a wonderful job in managing up until now, but it seems like it takes a different type of management for the future. It will go into the cut into the bone. It will be difference in quality. And I think we all have school boards. The school systems are managed, governed by school boards, which in turn are elected. We have citizens committees to screen the school board candidates. So I think that whole system your leadership, but also very much the boards, have to come forward with a new type of thinking about what the vision of a reduced educational system can be, because we're going to live it. We can't keep scrabbling down the cliff like this, expecting that another 1% will work. We've got to do that too, but I just think we need to think a different way. And all of us in this room ought to be having study sessions with the board, with you, sessions out of the budget process to create ways to deal with this in the future.
Let's get comments from Jane and Mariana. I know you've been.
I just want to say that the property owners did come here years ago and were very effective in how they went about trying to curtail everything that we were doing. But it had a very positive effect in the long run, because out of a budget that didn't pass, I remember being in the supermarket and some local resident said to me, "I'm so sorry for your loss, you know, that the budget was turned down." I said, "I'm sorry for you. You know, we did all we can, now it's you." And that was the birth of something called the Citizens Association that got involved in the schools, raised funds to take care of the things that we had lost, and it just woke them up to not thinking, woe is me, and it's somebody else's problem. So, I mean, I'm not suggesting that the budget go down, but I'm just saying that we have to think that we have to find a way to get people to really wake up and participate.
Marianne.
Yeah, my question is to both districts in terms of the future and sustainability, because we will have these fluctuations in the economy, and we're in a down spiral, hopefully eventually will go up again, but how do you see the role of the community-based organizations, volunteers, in terms of partnerships with the school districts that will make you know, the affordability something that will be maintained, so that we don't suffer with quality?
We're very fortunate in the Mamaroneck, Larchmont, in terms of some of those partnerships we already have. The Mamaroneck Schools Foundation, for example, gave us this year $275,000 in grants. The first year I came to the district, it was $315,000. Last year was something fairly at this level. So they continue to do an unbelievable job of supporting our teachers and of supporting creative initiatives in our schools. To think that in this kind of budget climate, $275,000 was given by our very generous community is just outstanding. So that's certainly a partnership we value. We have a partnership with a Fields group in the community. It's a public-private partnership that the school district has established with our Fields group, which is bringing a new all-weather field to our school district at no cost to the school district, where that group has raised a significant amount of money, again through our community members, to bring this initiative forward. So certainly I think we're involved in those partnerships, and we need to continue to be. And to speak about those partnerships and the gentleman's comments a moment ago, we have to work very closely with our community, because expectations might have to change. We can't sustain this kind of economic climate in our school districts in the same way we've done this for years. We've got to look toward our negotiating in a very, very serious manner. We have to look toward our community in understanding that the face of education will very much change. I appreciate Peter's comment about those individual student-teacher relationships, and they are valued, even though our school district is not 1,500, do you know? We have over 5,000 students, so it's certainly a larger, but I can tell you that because of our schools, because of the quality of our teachers, because of our parents, we very much have those individual relationships as well, and our kids value those. It's important. All of the letters of recommendation, how well our counselors know every student. But we can't sustain this if the climate continues this way. So we do have to look to our community and to partnerships to help us sustain as much of it as possible.
I agree. That's going to be one of the areas we're going to be looking at, I think, as we go forward, to sustain some of the programs that we have in place. But we also have contract limitations. I mean, you just can't have volunteers replacing teacher workforces. So we're going to have to deal with that as well as we move forward in contracts. I think boards today are very courageous. People who volunteer and run for a board and serve on a board are extraordinarily courageous, because there's no good news coming. They're not going to the CVS or the Stop and Shop and telling people what good news it is. They're always giving people bad news. And, other than giving out big dark sunglasses so they can walk around town, it's a very hard job that's underappreciated because it really is they're doing an extraordinary job in a very challenging economic climate.
Let's see if we can get 2 more questions in. Carolyn?
Yes, I just wanted to ask a quick question about the class sizes, the impact of the budget on class sizes. You don't have to be specific for each grade level or anything like that, but generally, if preserving academic excellence is important and a priority, how do you feel about class sizes and how do you prioritize that?
Well, that's very important in our community, both from our parent perspective and my own perspective. So we've left class size, we've held them where they are. We're concerned. I mean, I have a third grade looks like it's going to be 23, 24 in a classroom. That's a concern to me. I mean, as that creeps up now, before we even open and before the summer comes, a few students might tip that into the 26, 27 range. Can we open a classroom? We've decided that we're going to take that risk and see what happens, and we're not going to hire that staff person. That's not in this budget. But we also realize that we have reasonable class size throughout the district, and we're going to hold fast to that as much as we can. As I said to all the programs and priorities people, we're not just going to cut the AP classes because all the people there said, well, let's just do that. That'll solve the problem because I don't have any students who are taking AP classes yet. We're not going to just cut the elementary schools. We're going to look across the board and see what's the best quality programs and how can we maintain them as much as possible. So that's really our goal.
Last year, just a quick comment, last year we increased class size by 2 at the elementary schools. This year we are not increasing class size at the elementary schools. The middle school, we're doing a hybrid team model. We are going to be increasing class size in a couple of the grades by, we think, 2 to 3 students. We don't think it'll have a negative effect. More importantly, while class size is very, very important and certainly important to our parents, the quality of instruction is much more important, and that's why, although we've cut a huge amount of money out of our professional development funds, we have kept some money there because every bit of research tells us that the quality of teachers, the quality of instruction far outweighs class size.
Sure. It seems to me that here in this district we have something that's of a sterling model insofar as, and you mentioned the word partnership several times. Speaking of the Schools Foundation and other entities like that nationally, and given what we're talking about here, and given the fact that in suburban areas, I mean, we really represent what is perhaps critical across the swath of education and education issues and financing for education. It's not, so much the concern for urban districts, which certainly is a concern, but herein we have something that's a microcosm of critical issues facing this country. And to go back to that point on partnerships is to say, what of this foundation, school foundation here as part of a national movement and model that invokes more of a partnership that helps to stave off, the deficit and the consequences of deficit, and what that might mean insofar as particular quasi-privatization without having people retreat and leave to go to private schools. Can you comment, either of you, dear superintendents, on what is afoot in terms of those partnerships and models whereby communities like ours, look at what it means to provide an influx of funding and commitment to keep us away from the contingency. I mean, the contingency budget is a scary scenario. Someone has pointed out the 15 years going out from this. What about, those partnerships and the fortification of those to really keep not just the standard as it is in place, but the vision and increases going?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have a cohesive, organized community sense of the partnerships in terms of a holistic perspective, but the relationships that the school district in Mamaroneck enjoys with our partners is just incredible. Last year, and Mariana's sitting over there, because of our budget needs, we were going to, in fact, be losing much of co-op camp. And did it take you 2 weeks, Mariana? And how much did you raise?
We were just saying, but it's a lot to
How
raise.
much did you raise? Don't be
We
shy.
raised $65,000.
$65,000 in 2 weeks.
It's now on me, that's not clear. I just had the idea.
Our co-op summer camp, which are for children who need academic support as well as camp experience. So these are the kinds of things that make this community so amazing. I've often said, by the way, that the summit is the epicenter of the generosity and the cohesiveness of the Larchmont Mamaroneck community in terms of the good that you are all here to do for everyone in the community. And so I think that this is a shining example of that partnership, although I know you're not giving dollars away so quickly. But in fact, you all, in your own individual places throughout the community, help give those dollars to the people who need it. And so I think, again, back to that partnership piece, people step up in this community for the good of the children.
Ernie?
Yes. As a representative of the town of Mamaroneck, I'm often frustrated by the way New York State has carved the separation between schools and local government. And I'm particularly focused on when I see fleets of buses sitting idle while another division of government is paying for buses. The town maintains a fleet, as does the village, of senior buses, which are generally middle-of-the-day used buses. There ought to be some investigation of how we might be able to help each other by extending the time or the personnel operating it and help with transporting students. I mean, they're buses, and they work. And they're
in meeting with the Beeline bus people, we found out so much information about how they're regulated and how difficult it is for them to even change a route or impact other charter routes, that it was amazing to us as we sat through the process.
There were some barriers in terms of the funding that they accept from the
Federal government.
And their
And how they use the buses. So it was beyond just the conversation about moving them. I thought it was a rather easy conversation. I wanted them to move the route to the Boston Post Road. They couldn't do it.
We're going to have, excuse me, because it's 9 o'clock, we have to officially end our meeting. We can continue our discussion, however, for those that have questions and for those who are able to remain. But we're going to have to officially
One plug for anybody who is not currently on our school district email list and you want to receive regular email communications from us, please give me your email address.
And I want to say on behalf of the summit that I'm just so delighted. I thank Paul for his comments about it. We have two very special people who are board members representing each of the school districts. Janet Bookbinder and Heidi Sickles. We're so glad, and we will keep up, I promise, whatever follow-up we can do with the seriousness of this situation. It's so important to the community. So we thank you all so much. Thank all of you for coming.